Hello guys, so I saw many of you said that you tried to watch my earlier Korean videos with these thumbnails but couldn't really follow them. I originally thought that these were something only Korean viewers might care about, but the more I looked into it, the more I realized that many of you, especially those who've been following the situation day by day, would want the complete context too. So in this video, I'm going to talk about two things. First, there was a wave of petitions and fax campaigns done by the so-called NewJeans fans, bunnies, dragging NewJeans and ADOR into a government inquiry, even though the members themselves never filed anything. And secondly, the new evidence showing that NewJeans had planned to use Chimchakman's YouTube channel, that's a major YouTube channel in Korea with more than 3 million subscribers, as part of her broader media strategy months before the conflict became public. Okay, so let's break down what happened, why it matters, and why what these two stories reveal when you place them side by side. All right, first, let's start here. Here's an article that came out just today, earlier in the morning, titled, Exclusive. Misguided fandom leads to another crisis. ADOR and NewJeans could face ministry inquiry over complaints not filed by members themselves. By 세계일보. 1 year after resolving their exclusive contract dispute and returning to their agency, NewJeans and ADOR now face the possibility of another uncomfortable situation. This time sparked by a subset of fans acting on misguided intentions. 어긋난 팬심. Now, misguided intentions. We gotta talk about. We don't know who these people are. And although the article is trying to frame it like, oh, these are, immature fans acting on misguided intentions. But what if these guys know exactly what they're doing? So over the weekend, they made all these plans, sharing Google documents and the directions, how to submit petitions to the national agency system and the ministry, and with the list of all the phone numbers of the politicians and officers and officials, and a lengthy statement directed at the Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism. What if the leaders who planned on the initiative knew exactly what they're doing to create mess and chaos? But first, let's finish reading this article. Some fans formally filed a petition with the Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism, MCST, claiming that ADOR has been violating the members' personal rights. Because the petition was submitted through official channels, the ministry may conduct fact-checking procedures such as interviews, written inquiries, or Q&A sessions with both ADOR and the NewJeans members. Really? I mean, this might be an opinion by this journalist, but if that's really the case, this is kind of frustrating and infuriating as a taxpayer, as a Korean citizen. Just because you send faxes to politicians and government officials, just because you receive a large number of faxes from just random people, you need to go that far? Wow. All right. What worries the industry, the article says. Even more, what worries the industry even more is the direction this could take. These fans also sent the same complaints to lawmakers on the National Assembly's Culture, Sports, and Tourism Committee. This raises concerns that the fiasco from October last year, when HYBE executives and NewJeans member Honey were summoned to a parliamentary audit and became the subject of nationwide ridicule, could repeat itself, damaging both the company and the artist. I mean, if there's anything, it damaged the reputation of Korea. How do I know? Because I've heard directly from you guys, my international subscribers. According to the ministry and ADOR officials on November 18th, large numbers of fax complaints arrived at Minister Choi Hee-young's office between the 16th and 17th, November 16th and 17th. Now, it's interesting how the article mentioned ADOR as well. So it sounds like the Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism reached out to ADOR to ask, hey, we received all these complaints. What is going on over there? That might be the case. The details varied from fax to fax, but the core claims were the same. That ADOR, whose duty is to protect its artists, was instead harassing the members through incomprehensible actions. That ADOR was colluding with media outlets to create malicious public opinion, and that ADOR was favoring one side, heading and Hain, creating conflict among the members. Two things. The pattern, and it smells exactly the same as what has been going on for the past year. ADOR harassing the members. And what about ADOR colluding with media outlets? You have seen, with the video that I made recently, how most of the Korean media has turned against NewJeans members because of how rude they are, right? But these people are saying that, hey, if they do not agree with us, they are on HYBE side. You know what I'm saying? That's the logic that's been going through in their head. Although, I need to point out, some of them this might be the case for some of them, but for some portions of the people who led this movement, they might know exactly what they are doing. And you know what I mean by that, right? They're not necessarily the victims of confirmation bias, but they're doing all this for their own agenda. That might be the case. We'll see. Let's finish the article. In short, the fans demanded that the ministry conduct an investigation into alleged mistreatment of NewJeans by ADOR. Now, this journalist reached out to the ministry officials as well. A ministry official stated, a significant number of faxed petitions have reached the minister's office, and similar petitions have been filed through the National Electronic Petition System as well. They added, since these were submitted as formal petitions, the ministry will conduct an internal review and verify the details with relevant parties. Really? Haven't you learned from last year? Are you really going to waste taxpayers' money and resources to conduct an investigation into this case just because you're receiving large number of faxes? I mean, if you have tons of time and tons of free time, yeah, go ahead. You're welcome to do that. Except you're not gonna find out anything. But really, aren't you busy? All right. However, they cautioned that no decisions have been made regarding the method or schedule of this verification. All right. But it sounds like they are pretty determined to do this. However, they said, we must hear from both ADOR and all NewJeans members, but we first need to determine whether such meetings or communications are even feasible, they said. According to the official, the ministry plans to notify ADOR of the petition soon. Okay, but didn't the article say earlier that they already reached out to ADOR as well? So they're probably notified. But I guess, who knows? It kind of sounds weird though, this article. Again, the ministry plans to notify ADOR of the petition soon. How far the inquiry will go, the extent, the intensity, and whether interviews will take place has not yet been decided internally. Still, because the petitions were officially submitted, the ministry must determine the basic facts in order to issue a response to the petitioners. The problem is that ADOR and the members only recently restored their relationship after a year-long legal battle, and this government inquiry risked creating new tension between them. Yeah, so let's think about who would want this kind of tension between them. Smells like someone that we all know about. An inquiry insider commented, Industry Insider commented, they finally entered the reconciliation phase, but now some fans have filed petitions based on unverified claims. This could reignite conflict between ADOR and the members. Fans should think carefully about whether their actions really help the artists they care about. It is also concerning that the complaints were submitted to lawmakers such as Representative Min Hyung-bae on the Culture Committee. Regardless of whether the claims are true, exposing an artist who should be protected to public scrutiny risk damaging their image and turning them into a spectacle. What makes the situation more puzzling is that the petition was not filed by the parties directly involved. Instead, ADOR and the NewJeans members may have to undergo a government inquiry based solely on third-party accusations. This has led some people to question whether these petitions stem simply from misguided fandom behavior or from another motive altogether. Okay. This has led some people to question whether these petitions stem simply from misguided fandom behavior or from another motive altogether. I think this is the core sentence in this article. Another industry source noted, 2 members, Hain and Haerin, agreed with ADOR and decided to return, but the other 3, Minji, Honey, and Danielle, conveyed their intention to return unilaterally through their lawyers. Because this was done without reaching an agreement with the agency, some suspect that this petition campaign may be an attempt to gain leverage in the negotiation process. Yeah, that's pretty insightful. On October 30th, the court ruled in ADOR's favor in the exclusive contract validity lawsuit, determining that the contracts remain valid. Although the members initially announced plans to appeal, ADOR stated on November 12th that Haerin and Hain had decided, after careful consideration with their families, to respect the court ruling and continue under their contracts. That same day, Minji, Honey, and Danielle also conveyed their intention to return through their legal representatives, but ADOR said it was verifying the sincerity of their statements and did not immediately make an official announcement. All 5 members ultimately chose not to submit an appeal before the deadline at midnight on the 14th. As a result, the first trial ruling is now final, and the members will remain on their contract with ADOR until 2029. Yeah, so this is, where the article's central point becomes deeply troubling, right? So according to the ministry, a large volume of fax petitions arrived in the minister's office just over 2 days. And these petitions demand that the government investigates ADOR for allegedly harassing the members, colluding with the media, and creating conflict among the girls by favoring certain members. And of course, none of these claims came from the members themselves, at least not that we know of. And none came from verified statements. They originated entirely from third-party speculation. But the article says, but because these petitions were submitted formally through official channels like the National Civil Petition System, the ministry is required to review them. And that review could include interviews, written questions, or even direct communication with the members. So this means that despite the members' decision to return to ADOR, despite the court ruling confirming their contracts, and despite the public statements like signaling reconciliation, the ministry now has to determine whether an inquiry is necessary. So this is the first problem, right? A third party has effectively forced both the members and the agency into a new government process they never asked for. The second problem is the precedent that this could create. I mean, it's not the first time that NewJeans has been creating these political spectacle because of unverified claims. And the memory of last October, parliamentary audit, this still lingers. And this is humiliating as a Korean citizens. And of course, that event damaged the group's image, especially Honey's image, and made them the target of mockery, even from those who do not really care about Kpop or NewJeans at all. And the article warns that the same situation could repeat itself, because a complaint submitted to a lawmaker can snowball into something bigger, because I mean, okay, the article kind of suggests that, no, probably no politician wants to appear indifferent to claims involving idol protection. But if you think about it, the Korea as a whole must have learned something from last year's event, right? With Honey national audit situation, where the entire politicians all got, misguided and tricked by the woman behind this entire event, Minijin. To ignore her statement was not something that Honey even heard in the first place. Minijin created that phrase out of thin air, and she discussed plans with how to go about the national audit with Sejong lawyer and Honey right before the audit for 4 hours. So haven't we learned something from last year? I don't know. I hope the lawyers, lawmakers, have really thought about what they did last year in October. If they haven't learned anything, they should retire, I think. And the another problem is timing. Like, we're not talking about, we are talking about a group that at least 2 members that have just reconciled with their agency after grueling legal battle. Yeah, Hedin and Hain reached agreement with ADOR. And although Minji, Honey, and Daniel, they put out a statement that sounds so weird, they at least expressed their intention to return as well. And no one appealed the court ruling. The exclusive contract remains valid until 2029. So, at least, the relationship is supposed to stabilize professionally, legally, and emotionally. And precisely at that moment, someone decided to submit petitions claiming that ADOR is harassing the members again. And the article raises that uncomfortable question. Are these petitions truly the result of misguided fan loyalty, or are they part of a strategic effort to influence ongoing negotiations or undermine ADOR's position? I am smelling someone, and I am hearing someone right here, because this is not a baseless suspicion, especially considering that Minijin recently put out a second statement saying that NewJeans must remain as 5, and that she even said, do not use the girls, do not use the members, where in fact she was the one who's been using the members all along, and the public knows about that. But do politicians know about that? I hope they do. And yeah, some of you have already asked me about the random lawyer. Was it No Hee-young? No Hee-young 변호사. This woman recently appeared on a major, political theme YouTube channel, 매불 show, and they had a debate about NewJeans' situation. And a lot of the subscribers of the channel really criticized the video and the debate because the participants haven't prepared at all. They didn't know what they were talking about. And now this woman, this lawyer, she had access to a police report on Minijin. And she basically defended Minijin. And there are some, bunnies trying to say that Minijin has been innocent all along. But it turns out the police report segment that, she showed people, it talks about Minijin's own statements. So if you're using that to say that Minijin is innocent, you're basically saying that, Minijin is innocent because Minijin says that she is innocent. It just makes no sense. But yeah, and this pattern, when Minijin opens her mouth randomly, we know something's going on behind the scenes. Which is probably why this article is questioning the motive behind these petitions, fax bombs, right? And again, I don't think this is a baseless suspicion at all. And if that's true, then the fandom is not just misinformed, it is being weaponized by someone, right? By some parties. And the unintended consequences fall entirely on NewJeans. If the ministry decides to conduct interviews or request statements, the group will once again find themselves caught between public pressure, agency responsibilities, and political scrutiny. Now, the three members, Minji, Honey, and Daniel, they might like that to happen. But what about the two members, Haerin and Hain, who have coordinated with ADOR and their families in advance for their return? This is really a messy situation. This is quite messy, I think. This is why the article frames the behavior as misguided fandom, but the implications run deeper, right? At some point, the line between fandom and political interference must be drawn. Because when unverified claims from anonymous communities can trigger government procedures, we're no longer talking about fan culture. We're talking about institutional manipulation and waste of taxpayers' money and resources and time. So this incident confirms a pattern that we have been seeing for a year. The so-called fandom factions using public institutions as leverage in industry disputes, and this does not, of course, describe all fans. Hope not. In fact, most fans, as I have said, are exhausted by the cycle and either left or simply want the members to work in peace. But the actions of a few, whether they have bad intentions or not, can impose consequences on many players and on the artists themselves. So as this situation unfolds, there's a question. How many more times will NewJeans, ADOR, HYBE be forced into political arenas because of claims they never made? And what responsibility do fans have when their actions risk dragging artists into yet another public spectacle? And yeah, kind of genuinely am curious about who these people are. Are they genuine fans? Who knows? Now, before we move on, it's important to understand how the law actually treats this kind of behavior, and why even an action that disrupts a government office may fall into a legal gray zone rather than a criminal one. So here's an article published by a media agency, Law Talk News, that covers like legal matters. NewJeans fandom paralyzes ministry with fax bomb. Obstruction of business? Supreme Court says no. The fax machine inside the Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism has barely had a moment of silence. Dozens of faxes pour in each day, sometimes in bundles of 20 to 30 pages. The sender is Bunnies, the fandom girl group NewJeans. According to Sports World, these fans insist that ADOR is infringing on the members' personal rights and are demanding a government-level fact-finding investigation. What began as a desire to protect their artists has now escalated into a fact-based protest directed at a government agency. At the ministry's daily operations, slow to a crawl, some observers argue that this is clearly obstruction of business. But legally, the chances of a criminal charge are extremely low, the article says. Common sense says it's interference. The law, however, says it isn't. Why? No violence, no threat. An obstruction of business law does not apply to public duties. The article says, if someone directed a fax bomb at a private company like ADOR and paralyzed its operations, Article 314 of the Criminal Act would apply. Obstruction of business. The use of force to disrupt work meets the criteria. But the target here is a government institution. The legal framework shifts completely. The Supreme Court's ruling is clear. Interference with the public official's execution of duties cannot be punished under the obstruction of business statute. Why? Because there is already a separate crime, obstruction of public officials in the execution of duties, and that crime only applies when violence or threats are involved. Fax floods and phone calls do not contain physical force or intimidation, so there's no legal basis for punishment. Okay, not violence, not deception, a legal blind spot. Could other charges apply? To apply Article 136, there must be violence, like physically attacking an official or intimidation, threatening harm. Sending pages of documents through a fax line satisfies neither. What about obstruction of public duties by deception? That requires tricking an official with false information. But fans did not conceal their identity or their purpose. They simply conveyed their demands, excessively but openly. Unless the faxes contain fabricated claims, it cannot be considered deception. As a result, mass fax attacks against a government agency fall into a legal gray zone where criminal punishment is virtually impossible. Okay. Criminal liability unlikely, but civil liability remains. Avoiding criminal charges does not mean avoiding responsibility. Under civil law, this could be considered abuse of rights. Citizens have the right to petition the government, but that right is not protected when it is exercised solely to harass or paralyze an institution. In theory, the government could seek civil damages for wasted administrative resources, but suing citizens is politically sensitive, and proving quantifiable damages is difficult. A lawsuit is unlikely in practice. But the last section is this. More dangerous than legal loopholes, public backlash. The NewJeans fandom's fax offensive may not lead to punishment under criminal law, but that does not make the action legitimate. Dozens of faxes drain administrative capacity, and the cost is passed on to other citizens. In trying to defend their favorite artist, fans may trigger public backlash instead, the very opposite of their intended goal. So yeah, this legal angle, that was the article, adds another layer to the discussion, right? Because when you combine the ministry's operations paralysis with the Supreme Court's position on public duty interference, it becomes clear that the issue isn't just about fandom behavior anymore. It's about how far these tactics can go and what it means, when a government agency ends up caught in the middle of a narrative war. And again, as this article suggests, and this article as well, these so-called fans do not really care about their artist, which is why I really question their motives. Just like Minijin. Does she really care about NewJeans members? No. If she does, she shouldn't have dragged them into this whole mess for the past year. Same thing with the bunnies. Those bunnies who are making all these unverified claims and creating chaos. You know what? Yeah, you know what I mean. They do not care about the members. Those who do care about the members but feel disillusioned left the fandom a while ago. And what's most disturbing about this whole situation is that none of this feels like the work of genuine fans, right? It looks far more like the same coordinated network that fueled last year's chaos. Like toxic accounts, HYBE antis, and people aligned with Minijin. And now recycling the same tactics under a new pretext. Because, let's be honest, the parliamentary circus last October didn't happen because NewJeans were suddenly victimized by the system. It happened because Honey willingly stepped into that spotlight under MAJ's direction. And that moment was engineered. It was calculated. And it was used to frame HYBE as a villain while building sympathy for Honey and NewJeans and Minijin's narrative. And the same pattern is showing up again now. So the recent wave of fandom petitions doesn't behave like real fandom, because real fans do not weaponize government institutions, and they don't spam a ministry with fax bombs that could drag the members right back into the political mess they helped ignite last year. And real fans do not push actions that benefit only one side, and that is NewJeans' side. So what we're seeing instead is the same pattern and ecosystem that has always amplified NewJeans' agenda. People who hate HYBE, and people who want to keep NewJeans entangled in conflict because it helps their narrative. So I would say it's like coordinated disruption, dressed up as protecting the members. Now, as someone who supports other HYBE artists, and also someone who invests in the company, this is exhausting to watch, because every time HYBE stabilizes and attempts to move forward, this coordinated network pops up again and injects chaos back into the conversations. And these petitions don't just create noise online, they undermine the emotional recovery of all the parties involved in the situation. They attempt to pressure HYBE during negotiations with the 3 members who returned unilaterally. But beyond the fandom politics, and this is the reason why I made this video in Korean, what worries me as a Korean citizen is how easily our civic system are being manipulated. Government petition channels existed for legitimate public concerns, not to be hijacked by a faction supporting a former CEO who already lost the public's trust. So watching a ministry's workflow get clogged by a targeted fax campaign, not for a national issue, but for something ridiculous like this, is embarrassing. Again, this isn't fans protecting NewJeans. This is the same MHA-aligned faction using public institutions as leverage, just like they used the National Assembly hearing stage last year. The tragedy is that the people who claim to be helping the members are the ones keeping them trapped in NewJeans' shadow. And we see some of them coming over to my channel and write comments, right? They aren't letting the girls move on. They aren't letting reconciliation settle. And they aren't letting the public see NewJeans outside of the constant narrative warfare that benefits one person alone. So, yeah, as a fan, as a shareholder, and as a citizen, it's disillusioning to realize how predictable and how manufactured this chaos has become. So there we go. Do you want to hear about this case? Let me really go through it quickly. So this part of the story uncovers how NewJeans attempted to use Chimchakman's platform as part of a larger media strategy before HYBE conflict went public. Chimchakman, how many subscribers does he currently have? 3 million. 3.01 million. So, a dispatch revealed KakaoTalk message from March 29th, 2024 showed NewJeans telling somebody, I'm assuming it's a former VP, Isanwoo, to put content on Chimchakman's channel to subtly push a copycat narrative. And I think based on this screenshot, she wanted Shinusok to appear on Chimchakman to push that narrative. And it wasn't random. It relied on an existing triangle built earlier through NewJeans' 2023 appearance on the channel, which connected NewJeans, Shinusok, and Chimchakman in a ready-made media pipeline, so to say. But interestingly, the plan never materialized because after the conflict began in April of last year, neither Shin-woo-seok nor NewJeans appeared on Chimchakman's YouTube channel. But interestingly though, 1 month later, Chimchakman, the owner of the channel, signed a petition supporting Minijin, believing he was simply doing a favor. But seen alongside, the KakaoTalk message, his innocent signature now appears as part of a broader PR strategy that Minijin had been crafting. Because the script notes that Chimchakman likely had no idea he was positioned as a tool in a coordinated media war. Yet, his involvement unintentionally strengthened Minijin's narrative, which later contributed to misinformation, harm to lots of different players, and distorted public understanding. And meanwhile, a long list of other red flags, right? Media manipulation and strategic messaging further exposed how calculated Minijin's operations had been. So I wonder, how might this guy feel now that he realized that he was almost used by Minijin, if not already by, because according to his explanations, director Shin-woo-seok of Dolphin Kidnappers suggested that he sign a petition, which he did, in favor of Minijin. So how does Chimchakman feel knowing that his reputation was considered a vehicle in Minijin's strategy? Does it feel used? Does it feel fooled? Or does it feel frustrated that his good intentions were tied to something so messy? I mean, it's a difficult position for anyone, especially someone whose career revolves around public perception and trust. And for someone who is, famously good at sensing trouble, that is Chimchakman is known for, this situation might hit differently. So, yeah. If you go over to my video in Korean, you will see that people have mixed feelings. There's sympathy for Chimchakman, there's frustration toward Minijin's manipulation, and there's a sense of betrayal because how her narrative harmed other people. And there's discomfort knowing that a creator they liked got unwittingly drawn into this. I was one of those. I used to watch his contents pretty frequently, but after he signed the petition and after he talked about it and expressed anger publicly to those who've been, asking him why he signed the petition, I don't really blame him. Signing a petition itself is not a wrong move, I wouldn't blame him for submitting a petition because it's not a crime, nor inherently immoral. But we cannot ignore the consequences, right? Because his signature legitimized a narrative that later turned out to be based on distortions. And that narrative harmed Islet, harmed other people, the Seraphim, the staff, employees, many of them. And worst of all, it harmed the public's ability to distinguish fact from fiction. Again, that's not necessarily his fault, but it was a result, though, of him signing a petition on behalf or in favor of Minijin. And now that everything is out, I still wonder, would Chimchakman address this issue? Would he ignore it and move on? Or would he address it openly? I doubt it, though. And would he distance himself from Shin-woo-seok, his longtime friend? Shin-woo-seok appeared on his channel even back in 2019. And they traveled recently, was it last year, to a foreign country together. So they were pretty close. But would he distance himself from Shinusok, at least publicly? Or would he clarify the petition again? Because I'm pretty sure a lot of people will comment about it on his contents and, bother him. Or would he quietly let the issue fade and hope viewers do the same? I think his audience might wonder. And again, his commenters will bring it up repeatedly, and at some point he may need to choose between explanation and silence, not because he owes anything to Minijin, but because this affects his brand and his image and his credibility. But yeah, if you're Chimchakman in this situation, that's not a comfortable place to be. But again, I'm pretty sure there are a lot of innocent people involved in this controversy who are simply used by Minijin. Although a lot of people who made comments on my video are suspecting that he was involved with this plan all along. And at this point, it's pretty clear that director Shinusok of Dolphin Kidnappers has been on the same boat with Minijin all along, because he shared that secret shareholder agreement with Kakao Entertainment with Minijin. Out of all people, why would she have access to the contract? Let me know your thoughts. And as always, let's stay positive, respectful, and classy. What was the strangest part of these events and recent happenings? And what are your opinions on them? All right. Peace and love. Bye-bye.